I never thought I'd end up sleeping in the back seat of my old Honda Civic before I even turned 18, but here I am, wrapped in a hoodie that smells like fast food and exhaustion, staring at the ceiling through fogged windows. I guess I should start from the beginning, because no one just suddenly ends up homeless at 17 without a story behind it. My name's Kayla, and I used to think my mom was my best friend. After my dad left when I was 10, it was always just the two of us and my younger siblings, Liam, who's 9, and Emma, who's 6. Mom had to work long shifts at a diner to keep the lights on, so I stepped up, or at least I thought I did. I made lunches, picked them up from school, helped with homework, cooked dinner. It wasn't easy, but I loved them. I figured that's what family does, you help each other out. But lately, it started feeling like I wasn't helping anymore. I was parenting. When Mom got a new boyfriend, Rick, things got worse. He wasn't mean exactly, but he made himself comfortable way too fast, sitting in Dad's old chair, drinking beer, making comments about how I acted like the woman of the house. I hated that. I'd come home from school, drop my backpack, and Mom would already be gone, her phone buzzing with texts from Rick about his car or his bad day. Then came the expectation that I would be responsible and take care of everything while she built her new life. It started small, Kayla, can you watch the kids tonight? And grew into, you know what to do, I'll be home late. She'd leave at 6 and come back after midnight. Then mornings, then weekends. One night I told her I couldn't do it anymore. I had a huge chemistry project due and needed time. She rolled her eyes, told me I was selfish, that I had no idea how hard she worked. Maybe she was right. I felt guilty, so I didn't argue. But it didn't stop. I missed a friend's birthday, then my part-time job at the library because she needed me. When I tried to tell her I was falling behind at school, she said, "You think your siblings are a burden? They're family, Kayla. Not everyone gets that kind of responsibility. You should be grateful." Grateful. That word stuck in my throat like glass. I started keeping a small notebook hidden in my backpack, writing everything down, times, days, things she said. I don't know why. Maybe to remind myself I wasn't crazy. The breaking point came one Friday night, right before finals. Mom had planned to go on a weekend trip with Rick, some couples retreat. I told her I couldn't stay with the kids all weekend. I had to study. She said, "Figure it out." I said no. I'd already been up late every night that week taking care of them while trying to cram equations into my tired brain. I said, "Mom, I'm serious. I can't keep doing this. You have to find someone else." Her face went cold. It was like I just insulted her. She said, "If you think you're too grown up to help your family, then maybe you should act grown up somewhere else." I thought she was bluffing. She wasn't. She packed a bag, took Rick's keys, and before she left, she said, "If you're not going to babysit, then don't bother coming back." Then she was gone. I stood there in shock, watching the taillights fade down the street, while Liam and Emma were asleep on the couch. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. I waited until morning, fed them breakfast, walked them to the neighbor's house, Mrs. Parker, who's known us forever, and told her Mom was gone for the weekend. Then I packed my own bag. I thought maybe I could stay with my friend Alyssa, but her parents said they couldn't have someone living there without permission. I slept in my car for the first time that night, in a parking lot near the library. It was weirdly quiet. The air smelled like rain, and I kept checking my phone, half expecting Mom to text me to come home. She didn't. The next day, I went by the house to grab my textbooks, but my key didn't work. She'd changed the locks. I rang the bell, and when she opened the door, she looked at me like I was a stranger. She said, "I told you what would happen." I begged her, said I had nowhere to go, but she shook her head. "You made your choice, Kayla. Actions have consequences." She actually said that. Like I'd committed some crime by saying no. I walked back to my car feeling numb. I didn't even cry until I got in and slammed the door. I screamed into my sleeve until my throat burned. It wasn't fair. I wasn't trying to be ungrateful or rebellious, I just wanted to live like a normal teenager. Go to school, hang out with friends, plan for college. Not raise my siblings while my mom played house with some guy. But that night, sitting in the dark, something inside me shifted. I realized she wasn't coming for me. She'd made up her mind. I didn't know what to do next, but I promised myself I'd figure it out. I started making lists, people I could call, places I could go. I didn't have much money, maybe $200 from my library job. I texted my friend Alyssa again, and she said maybe her cousin could help me find a place. I didn't want pity, I just wanted a chance. I didn't tell anyone at school yet because I was embarrassed. Who wants to admit their mom kicked them out for not babysitting? But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Mom wasn't the kind of person to let things go quietly. I could feel something brewing, something worse than silence. I didn't sleep much that night, the one after she locked me out. Every sound outside my car made me jump, a siren in the distance, a stray dog scratching near the dumpster, the hum of a passing truck. My phone battery had died hours earlier, so I couldn't scroll or text anyone. It was just me and the dark. I kept replaying the last thing my mom said, actions have consequences. Like I was some criminal. By morning, I felt hollow, like someone had scraped out all the soft parts of me and left only the ache. I drove to the high school early because it was warm and the bathroom had outlets. I charged my phone there, washed my face in the sink, and practiced my "I'm fine" smile in the mirror until I almost believed it. Alyssa found me at lunch and handed me a paper bag with a sandwich. I tried to make a joke about it, but she just said quietly, "My cousin knows someone who helps kids like you." I froze. Like me? She nodded. Teens who get kicked out. There's this shelter downtown. It's not terrible. The word shelter made my stomach twist. I didn't want to be one of those kids. But I was. That night I drove there, parked across the street, and watched. The building was old, red brick with peeling white trim, but there were lights on inside and people talking, laughing even. I sat there for almost an hour before I went in. A woman named Carla greeted me at the desk. She looked tired but kind. When I told her my age and what happened, she didn't flinch. She just nodded, like she'd heard it 100 times before. She found me a bed, handed me a blanket, and told me I could stay for up to 2 weeks while they figured something out. It was small, just a bunk room with 6 other girls, but it was warm. For the first time in days, I slept through the night. The next morning, I woke up to a text from my mom. My heart jumped when I saw her name, but when I opened it, it said, "Don't show up here again. You're not welcome until you apologize." Apologize? For not being her unpaid babysitter? I threw my phone onto the mattress and buried my face in my hands. Carla noticed me crying at breakfast. She didn't ask questions, just said, "You can't control what she does, honey. You can only control what you do next." It sounded simple, but it felt impossible. Still, I started going to school again, showering at the shelter, saving the little money I had. I even started a part-time shift at the diner down the street to replace my lost library job. For a moment, it felt like I could almost build something new. But then everything started to unravel again. It began with the school counselor calling me into her office. She had that gentle voice adults use when they're about to ruin your day. She said someone had called Child Protective Services about my situation. I froze. She said they wanted to know if I was safe. I said yes, that I was at a youth shelter. Then she asked if I'd abandoned my siblings. The words hit me like a punch. Apparently, my mom told CPS I'd run off and left her alone with the kids after months of her begging for help. I couldn't believe it. She flipped the story completely. The counselor said they'd have to look into both sides, and suddenly I was under investigation. I wanted to scream. How could she do that to me? She kicked me out, and now she was acting like I was the problem. I tried calling her, but she blocked my number. So I messaged Liam through his school email, which I'd helped him set up last year. He wrote back a few hours later, short sentences that sounded scared. Mom says you're mad at us. Are you coming home soon? My heart cracked reading that. I told him I loved him, that none of it was his fault, but I didn't know if he'd even get the message before she deleted it. The next few days were a blur of school, work, and worrying. Carla said CPS might call me for a statement, so I should tell the truth. But what if Mom lied better? She always did. She could cry on command, twist words until even I doubted my memory. I started second-guessing everything. Maybe I should have just done what she wanted. Maybe this was my fault. But then I remembered Liam's face when I'd leave for school, how tired he looked, how often Mom would yell at him for little things, like spilling milk. I couldn't go back to that. I couldn't live in that house anymore. One night, about a week later, I was wiping down tables at the diner when someone came in that made me freeze. Rick. He didn't recognize me at first, maybe because I was in uniform, but when he did, he smirked. Well, if it isn't the runaway babysitter. I ignored him, but he leaned against the counter. Your mom's real upset, you know. You made her look bad. CPS showing up and all that. Maybe you should fix it before she decides she's done with you for good. I said nothing, but my hands were shaking. When I told Carla about it later, she looked worried. If he comes back, tell me right away, she said. And don't go anywhere alone with him. The next day, I noticed my car had been moved a few inches in the shelter's parking lot. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but then I saw a folded piece of paper under the wiper. It was from Mom. It said, if you don't come home and tell them the truth, I'll make sure you regret it. My chest went cold. She knew where I was. I didn't tell anyone at first. I just sat on my bunk that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the other girls breathe in their sleep, and wondering how my own mother could hate me this much. I wasn't a bad kid. I didn't drink, didn't sneak out, didn't get into trouble. I just said no one time, and that was enough for her to turn me into the villain. But deep down, under all the fear, I started feeling something else too, anger. Real, burning anger. She wanted me to crawl back, but I wasn't going to. If she thought she could scare me into submission, she was wrong. Still, I couldn't shake the dread. Something told me she wasn't done with me yet. I just didn't know how far she'd go. I started carrying my backpack with me everywhere, even when I went to the bathroom, because I couldn't shake the feeling that someone might mess with my things. Every noise outside the shelter made me tense. The letter under my windshield kept replaying in my head. I showed it to Carla eventually, after 2 sleepless nights. She pursed her lips, told me she'd keep it on file in case things escalated. You might want to file a police report, she said, but the thought of walking into a police station and explaining that my own mom was threatening me made me sick. It felt wrong, like betraying her, even after everything she'd done. Still, the next few days were quiet, and I started to think maybe it was over. I focused on finals, crammed every spare minute at the diner, and avoided talking about home. But that calm didn't last. On Thursday, I came out to my car after school and found the back window cracked. Nothing was stolen, but my notebook, the one where I'd written down everything from the beginning, was gone. I felt my stomach drop. Only Mom would know about that notebook. I used to write in it at the kitchen table, thinking she wasn't paying attention. I drove straight to the shelter, heart pounding, and showed Carla the broken glass. She said we'd file a report first thing in the morning. That night, I barely ate. I just kept thinking about what she could do with that notebook. It had everything, dates, details, stuff that could make her look bad if CPS saw it. If she turned it around, made it seem like I was lying or unstable, I could lose everything. When I finally fell asleep, I dreamed I was back in the house, but the locks were gone, and no matter how hard I tried to close the door, it kept opening on its own. The next morning, I was halfway through my shift at the diner when a woman in a gray blazer came in. She asked for me by name. My stomach dropped. She introduced herself as Ms. Warren from CPS. She said they needed to follow up on the report. My hands were still wet from washing dishes, and I could feel my heart beating in my wrists. We sat in a booth, and she started asking questions about my home life, my siblings, why I left. I told her everything. The nights alone with them, the missed schoolwork, the trip she tried to take. Ms. Warren nodded a lot but didn't give much away. When I mentioned the threats and the broken window, her pen stopped moving for a second. She said, "We'll look into that. But I do need to let you know your mother's story is very different." My throat tightened. Different how? She hesitated. She says you've been emotionally unstable for a while. That you left without warning, and she's worried about your behavior. I almost laughed, but it came out as a choked sound. She's lying. Ms. Warren looked at me carefully, not unkindly, but like she wasn't sure who to believe. "We'll be in touch soon," she said before leaving. I sat there staring at the empty booth long after she left, trying not to cry. Carla told me later that CPS would interview Mom next, then maybe the kids. That scared me more than anything. If Mom told them what to say, they'd go along with it. They were too young to understand what was happening. A few nights later, I was finishing homework at a table in the shelter when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. It was Liam. His voice was shaking. He whispered, "Kayla, Mom's really mad. She said if you talk to anyone about her, she's going to take Emma away to live somewhere else." I felt like I couldn't breathe. "Liam, listen to me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You didn't do anything wrong, okay? Whatever she says, I love you both." Then the line went dead. I called back, but it went to voicemail. I didn't know what to do. I went to Carla, told her everything, and she sighed like she'd seen this kind of thing before. "We'll tell Ms. Warren," she said. "She needs to know this." But the next day, before I could even follow up, 2 police officers showed up at the shelter. Everyone froze when they walked in. They asked for me. My heart dropped into my stomach. Carla went with me to the office, and one of the officers said, "We got a report that you may have stolen from your mother's home." My jaw actually dropped. What? I haven't even been there. They said she'd reported missing jewelry, a watch, and some cash. My voice trembled as I said, "She's lying. I swear." They didn't arrest me, but they said they had to take a statement and would be checking the pawn shops. When they left, I sat there shaking. Carla put her hand on my shoulder and said, "She's trying to scare you, Kayla. Don't let her." But how could I not? My own mother was building a case against me. Every move she made seemed designed to destroy me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Liam and Emma, about how scared they must be. And then something else hit me. What if she really was planning to move? She'd mentioned once that Rick's brother had a place out of state. If she left, I might never see them again. I had to do something, but what could I do? I was 17, broke, and technically homeless. No one was going to take my word over hers. I decided I'd find proof. Something she couldn't twist. The next day after school, I drove by the house. It felt like trespassing just being there, but I stayed across the street, hidden behind a tree. The blinds were half open, and through them, I saw Liam in the living room. He looked smaller than I remembered. Then I saw Mom pacing, talking on her phone, gesturing angrily. A few minutes later, Rick came in, and she handed him something, my notebook. My chest went cold. She was showing him the pages. He flipped through it, laughing at something. That was it. I couldn't let her twist my own words against me. I had to get it back somehow. But I didn't have a plan yet. I just knew one thing: if I didn't act soon, she'd ruin whatever chance I had left to get out of this. That I spent that entire night trying to figure out how to get the notebook back. Every idea I had sounded crazy. I couldn't just walk up and ask for it, and breaking into the house wasn't an option, not after the stolen property claim. Still, I couldn't shake the image of Rick flipping through my private words, laughing like it was a joke. That notebook had everything: the nights she left me alone with the kids, the arguments, even the dates she went on those trips with him. If CPS saw it through her version of the story, she could twist it into something unrecognizable. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling trapped. The next morning, I went to school like nothing was wrong. But I wasn't there to learn. I was watching, waiting. Around lunchtime, I saw Liam walking with a teacher toward the office. He looked pale and nervous. I realized they must have pulled him for his CPS interview. My chest tightened. I wanted to run to him, tell him everything would be okay, but I couldn't. If Mom found out I'd approached him, it would only make things worse. I left campus early, saying I wasn't feeling well. I drove to a park a few blocks from our old house and sat there for hours, thinking. Finally, when the streetlights came on, I saw them, Mom's car pulling out of the driveway with Rick in the passenger seat. I didn't even think. I waited until they were gone, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears, and then I walked to the house. The blinds were drawn, the porch light off. I told myself I'd just look, maybe see if the notebook was visible through the window. I wasn't planning anything else. But then I saw it, my backpack, the one I'd left behind when she kicked me out, sitting by the couch through the glass. I knocked once, just in case anyone was home. No answer. My hands were shaking as I tried the side door. It was locked, but the small window pane above the knob was cracked, probably from when she'd slammed it once during an argument. I slipped my arm through carefully, turned the latch, and stepped inside. The air smelled like beer and cheap perfume. Everything looked smaller, darker, like it belonged to someone else now. My heart was racing as I grabbed my bag and started toward the door. That's when I saw it. The notebook, lying open on the kitchen counter next to a pile of bills. I hesitated, then reached for it. I didn't even make it 2 steps before I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. I froze. I peeked through the blinds, Mom's headlights. She wasn't supposed to be home yet. I panicked. There was no time to think. I ducked into the laundry room, clutching the notebook to my chest. I could hear their voices as they came in. Rick said something about picking up pizza, and Mom snapped, "Forget it." She was here. I can feel it. My blood went cold. How could she know? I held my breath as she walked through the kitchen. Her heels clicked against the floor, closer, closer. Then she stopped. I heard paper rustling. "It's gone," she said, her voice rising. She took it. That little liar took it. Rick cursed under his breath. I heard him open drawers, slam a cabinet. I knew I had seconds before they started searching. There was a small window above the washer, half open. I didn't think, I just climbed up, shoved it wider, and slipped through, scraping my arm on the frame. I hit the grass hard, bit my lip to keep from yelping, and ran. I didn't stop until I reached my car down the block. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely start the engine. When I finally got back to the shelter, Carla took one look at me and said, "What happened?" I couldn't even talk. I just handed her the notebook. She flipped through a few pages, frowned, and said, "Kayla, we need to make copies of this. All of it." The next day, she took me to the CPS office herself. We met with Ms. Warren again, and I showed her everything, the notebook, the text messages, the threatening note. For the first time, she looked genuinely alarmed. She said, "This changes things." She asked if I wanted to file a restraining order. The thought terrified me, but I nodded. It felt like the only way to make her stop. After that, everything happened fast. CPS scheduled a follow-up with my siblings. Mom must have found out, because that night, she called me from a blocked number. Her voice was low, shaky. "You think you can destroy me with your lies? You have no idea who you're dealing with." Then she hung up. I sat there staring at the screen, trembling. Part of me wanted to delete the call, pretend it never happened. But another part of me, the part that had slept in that car and worked 2 jobs to survive, refused to be scared anymore. The next morning, I told Carla everything. She called Ms. Warren immediately. A few days later, the police came to the diner again, but this time they weren't looking for me. They wanted to talk about my mom. Someone had reported that she'd left Liam and Emma home alone for 2 days. I don't know who called it in, maybe a neighbor, maybe Liam himself, but it was enough. CPS took temporary custody of them while the investigation continued. When Ms. Warren told me, I felt sick and relieved all at once. They were safe. That night, I cried harder than I had in weeks. Not because I missed her, but because I finally realized the truth. My mom didn't want a daughter. She wanted a stand-in. Someone to carry her weight so she didn't have to. And when I stopped doing that, she'd rather destroy me than admit it. For the first time, though, I wasn't scared. I had proof. I had people who believed me. But deep down, I also knew she wasn't going to give up quietly. Mom was the kind of person who always had one last move. I wish I could say everything got better right away after CPS took my siblings, but it didn't. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, interviews, and waiting. The shelter helped me file for legal protection, and Ms. Warren told me that, depending on how the investigation went, they might let me have some supervised visits with Liam and Emma. The thought of seeing them again gave me hope, but also fear. I didn't know how much Mom had told them, or if they even wanted to see me. At school, word started spreading about my situation. I could feel people staring when I walked by, whispering things they didn't understand. Some said I'd been abusive, others that I'd run away. No one wanted to ask me directly. Only Alyssa stayed by my side. She'd bring me snacks, help me study, and act like nothing was weird. Sometimes that normalcy was the only thing keeping me from breaking down. Then one night, everything shifted again. It was a Friday, a couple of weeks after the police visit. I was closing up at the diner when Carla called. Her voice was tense. "Kayla, you need to stay where you are. Don't go outside. Your mom's been calling the shelter all evening. She's angry and says she's coming to find you." My hands went cold. I peeked out the diner window, and for a moment, I thought I saw her car across the street, a dark sedan idling with its headlights off. I told my manager, and he locked the doors while I called the police. They came fast, but by the time they arrived, the car was gone. The officers took my statement and promised to patrol the area, but I didn't sleep that night. Every time a car passed the shelter, I'd flinch. The next day, Ms. Warren called. She said my mom had been found at a motel 2 towns over, drunk and shouting about how her daughter ruined her life. CPS was filing for temporary custody of the kids to extend into something more permanent, and she wanted to know if I'd be willing to testify. My mouth went dry, but I said yes. I had to. It wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about protecting Liam and Emma from the same cycle I'd lived in for years. The hearing was 3 weeks later. I'll never forget walking into that courtroom, wearing a borrowed blazer from Carla's office and shoes that didn't quite fit. My mom was already there, sitting with her lawyer. When she saw me, her face hardened. There was no sadness, no guilt, just cold fury. Rick wasn't there, apparently, he'd skipped town the week before. Maybe even he'd had enough. The judge asked me questions, how long I'd been caring for my siblings, what had happened when I refused, what my mom's behavior had been like. My voice shook at first, but as I talked, something strange happened. I stopped feeling scared. I started feeling strong. Every time I told the truth, I felt the weight lifting. Then they showed the notebook. Ms. Warren had submitted it as evidence, along with the messages and the note from the windshield. My mom's lawyer objected, saying it was emotional fabrication, but the judge overruled him. When my mom took the stand, she cried. Of course she did. She said I'd changed, that I'd become disrespectful and lazy, that I made her life impossible. The judge asked her why, if I was so unreliable, she'd left me in charge of 2 young kids so often. She stammered, couldn't answer. For the first time, she looked small. When it was over, the judge ruled that Liam and Emma would stay in temporary foster care until things stabilized, and that I could have supervised visits. My mom stormed out before the judge even finished speaking. I just sat there shaking, feeling like I'd been holding my breath for months and could finally exhale. The first time I saw my siblings after that, it was at a CPS center with toys and bright walls. They ran to me the moment they saw me. Liam wouldn't let go of my hand. Emma cried into my shoulder. "Mom said you left us," she whispered. I told her softly, "No, baby. I never left you. I was trying to come back the right way." It took everything in me not to break down right there. After that visit, something inside me started healing. I stayed at the shelter until I finished the school year, then moved into a transitional housing program for teens aging out of care. I got a scholarship for community college and kept working at the diner. Life wasn't perfect. There were nights I still woke up scared, convinced I'd see her car outside, but little by little, the fear faded. Then, about 6 months later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from my mom. Just seeing her handwriting made my stomach twist. I almost threw it away, but I didn't. The letter was short, barely a paragraph. She said she was sorry for how things turned out, but also that she still thought I'd made things harder than they had to be. There was no real apology, no acknowledgement of what she'd done. Just her trying to make peace on her terms. I didn't respond. Maybe one day I will, but not now. I'm still learning how to live without guilt, how to stop feeling like I have to fix everyone. Sometimes I see families at the diner and wonder what it would have been like if things had gone differently. But then I remember that night in the car, how lost I felt, and how far I've come since then. I didn't let her break me. That's what matters. Liam and Emma are still in foster care, but Ms. Warren says they might move in with our aunt soon. I see them every other week. They're doing better. Liam's back on the soccer team, Emma wants to be a teacher. They still ask when we can all live together again. I tell them soon, even though I don't know what soon means. All I know is I'm not the scared girl who used to do everything just to keep the peace. I'm someone who survived. Someone who said no and meant it. And that's enough for now. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the last words Mom ever said to me before she kicked me out: actions have consequences. She was right, just not in the way she meant. Because my actions, the ones she hated me for, were the reason I finally got free.